Go down. There you go.
Yeah, that's all money meetings.
We're ready to go?
Yes. We can pretty much do what we want over here.
I'm going to call the April 14th Isicsb board meeting to order. Sherry, can I get a roll call from you?
Jeff Swearingen,
I'm here.
Patrick Updike,
Here on the phone.
Bob Uni,
Here.
Tom Buckman,
Here.
Tom Lampy,
On the phone.
John Benson, Bob Von Wolfrat,
Here.
Andy Buffington,
On the phone.
Ellen Hagan. Here. Deb Craybill,
On the phone.
Carrie Devine,
On the phone.
Jason Leonard,
Here.
Ted Camachis,
Here.
Michael Casper,
Present by telephone.
Carol Lund Smith,
Here.
Linda Frederickson, Kelly Grosskirth,
Here.
Senator Feenstra, Senator Brace, Representative Kressig, Representative Holt, Craig Allen,
Here.
Helen Tryanovich,
Present by phone.
you have a quorum.
Thanks, Sherry.
Read the whole thing.
Introduction of board members. Start with Mr. Buckman.
Tom Buckman, Iowa Department of Public Health.
Ted Camachis, Sheriff from Marshall County, representing the Iowa State Sheriff's and Deputy Association.
Ellen Hagan, Jewel Fire and Rescue, EMT Firefighter 1, representing volunteer fighters.
Carol Lund Smith, Iowa Law Enforcement Academy.
Jason Leonard from the Waverly Police Department, representing municipal police.
Craig Allen, the statewide interoperability coordinator.
Hi, good morning. Bob Uni, Iowa DOT.
City Manager Trainer, Member at Large.
Bob Wolfrat, State CIO.
Jeff Swearingen, Iowa Department of Natural Resources.
Okay.
Board
Karen
member.
Murphy, Public Safety.
Okay. Any members on the phone, starting with Tom Lampy, please?
Tom Lampy, DPS.
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Mike
Deb
Casper,
Crable.
Wayne County Sheriff's Office.
Deb Crable, representing the professional fire chiefs as well as the volunteer fire.
Andy Buffington, representing communication centers.
Carrie Devine, representing Waterloo Police.
Okay. Thanks, Sally. Thanks, everybody. Thanks you for being here. Could I have a welcoming of the guests? Sandra?
Sandy Morrison, Police Department Communications.
Marty Smith, Iowa Department of Public Health.
Ryan Trump with Kimball Corporation.
Rodriguez, Iowa Communications.
Putnam, Motorola.
Kevin Condon, Iowa Communications Alliance.
John Tell Harris, Iowa Communications Network.
Shweta Alkanamari, Iowa Communications Network. Fox, EDS Communications.
Ulcer, Sierra Fire, Iowa Task Force 1.
Jim Lundstedt, Department of Homeland Security, Office of Emergency Communications.
Thank you all for being here.
Rounder.
Okay, obviously we have a couple things that are new here today. Obviously, other than sitting up here at front, as well as having the video feed online. Tom Lampy actually texted me and said that the video feed is 2 minutes behind. So this shouldn't be a problem as long as that they're all on the phone listening. So hopefully they'll be able to keep up. And anybody else that's actually watching it online, obviously you're 2 minutes behind. If you have remarks, go ahead and save them until the end at the public comment, and hopefully we'll get to you instead of bypassing you. So, board members, you've had a chance to look over today's agenda. Can I have a motion to approve that, please? Thanks, Ellen. Second?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, yes, sir.
so I have a recommendation or a suggestion to change the agenda, if I may.
Okay.
Is it appropriate for discussion after the second, or how do you want to do that?
If,
I wasn't quite quick enough to get in there and start with.
right, if Ellen wants to pull it back, that'd be fine if you want to talk about it.
Okay, on item number 19. So right now, we have a 19, A, B, and C. And item C reads MOU Westcom, comma, Woodbury, and then parenthesis, board action. I would like to modify line C to read MOA, parenthesis, board action, then add item D that says MOA, Woodbury, comma, Westcom. So breaking that up into two separate items.
Okay. Okay. Is that your motion to
That's
change
the
that?
motion that I'm making, yes.
Okay. Does anybody else have a second on Mr. Uni's?
Ellen, second.
Okay, thanks, Ellen. Any other discussion on that? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. The approval of the meeting minutes from March 10th. I'll have a chance to look over the minutes, see if there's any corrections or additions that need to be made.
Approve them as presented.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, Ted. It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the meeting minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, moving on to the SWIC report. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, sir. I've got 4 topics for today. The first is the FirstNet activities that have gone on. The regional interoperable communications committees that we set up for each region are currently meeting regularly, and we're driving towards identifying additional candidates to represent the various communities in those counties that are in each of the regions. If you'll recall, when we set up, we had meetings. Sean went out and held the meetings to get individuals identified. We now have a chair and a vice chair for each of those. They've met at least once. Each committee has met at least once. And now what we're doing is we're making a concerted effort to get each county represented. To remind everyone, the board has an appointed point of contact by legislative action that also is involved with the 911 Council. The challenge is that that person may not have an interest or appetite in the interoperability side of things. They may have more of an interest in the 911. So what we're trying to do is find someone that has an interest and can bring forth, and then can bring forth to us the interest of their community, and be a spokesman or an ombudsman, if you will, back with information that comes to the board, particularly with regard to FirstNet and with any changes that would come out with the LMR system. So it's a way to drive the communications down to the lowest levels in the organization or in the state, and be able to make sure that we've got good information for board decisions as we go forward, because worst thing that can happen is we put out a policy statement and find that we've got a heavy conflict with a lot of folks. So that's one of the accomplishments that we're working on. In fact, today, Helen Tranovich, our deputy SWIC, is up at Cherokee attending a RIC meeting that will go on slightly after this meeting. So she drove up there to be a participant in that particular meeting. The second aspect that I'd like to give you a general update on is on the LMR Isicsb. Operations Committee will have some discussion about some of the things that are going to happen as we move forward. Interoperability not operability, but the interoperability component of that. As you roll out a statewide voice radio system, you have to find ways for people to come to your platform or for your platform to get to them, depending upon the terms and condition, be it VHF 400 or whatever frequency band they're operating in. And how does that interoperability work? And it's real easy to say and maybe not so easy to make happen sometimes. So that's one of the areas that we as a board will be spending a lot more time on, and I as a SWIC am focused on and think about all the time. In addition to that, we've had a couple meetings this month that were, I think, particularly meaningful. One of them is what's called over-the-air rekeying and over-the-air programming. So they're referred to as OTAR and OTAP. A lot of things can be done in this system that in the past may have had to have radios touched. And I hope that we listen carefully to what Motorola may have to say today about that, the vendor for this project. And if they don't talk about it, we will be discussing it more as we move forward, because it has a huge opportunity for a more elegant change in the system as we go forward. So that's pretty exciting to have that technology available. One of the things that will need some more closer attention as we move forward will be the fleet map over the next 30 days. We're going to need to have a clear understanding of what that fleet map will look like, what the user ID configuration will look like. And I think I mentioned to some folks when we first started this project that, having been through it once before, the easy part is getting through the legislative components of getting the money. After that, it gets really complicated. And I know it looked complicated before, but we're going to have a lot of fun going forward. And I'm actually looking forward to it. On the LMR, so the thing I'd like to talk about is basically our LMR interoperability as we stand today. If you'll remember, we've been reporting for about 3 months. The technology committee had been working on trying to come up with a way to reduce the interference along the western side of the state, coming over from Nebraska. And I was at the 911 council meeting yesterday, and our ombudsman, Rob Coppert, was handing out bright yellow sheets of paper with kind of frequently asked questions and what it looks like and how to go about doing it. So we were getting some good, Rob was being a big asset in getting that information out there. For the board, just as a general reminder, what the technology committee came up with was the use of a digital tone squelch, which is one of 3 methods to reduce and knock down that interference so that it doesn't get into the dispatch center. So again, point to point is the Iowa frequency used for dispatch center to dispatch center communication. And they were receiving harmful interference to the point where they wanted to turn the volume down because all they were getting was static and noise coming across. Well, if you're turning it down, there's no way it can be used for interoperability. So we had to find a way to clean that, and through the help of a lot of folks, we were able to find DCS tone 271, and I believe Westcom tried testing it back to Cass County, and it was a little too far of a reach. So there was some other testing that was done, and we agreed that it solved the problem. And so there was a policy statement that we as a board put out and delegated, bound to the technology committee for them to work into the weeds on this stuff. Because that would probably be an hour-long conversation with Patrick at this particular meeting. So you're getting an executive summary from Craig that we've solved the problem, and it is now being rolled out. And I think it's an elegant solution to some of the challenges that we will have technologically. This is just one of those things that we're going to be seeing more of, that the board will be asked to get involved in, and it's exciting for that. So having said that, the last topic I wanted to briefly touch on was travel. Chair Lampy and I have requested to attend a DHS OEC hosted TDMA, time division multiple access TDMA user meeting in Colorado. And what they're doing is they're bringing together a consortium of individuals that operate these systems and looking for best practices. And since ours is in the process, it will be the first statewide TDMA. As it's in the process of being developed, we want to make sure that on the user side of things, we're completely understanding what we have available to us and how we might apply those. And if they have operational impacts, we need to understand them sooner rather than later, because that takes the longest time to get folks up to speed. So there'll be I believe he had If it isn't on the Finance Committee request, it will be part of a request I would like to bring up. The second travel I'll have is I'll be traveling to Jacksonville, Florida, week after next for the National Council of SWCS meeting. They meet twice a year, spring and fall. As I think I've mentioned to the board, I'm the chair of the Technology and Policy Committee for the National Council of SWCS, and we'll be doing a presentation to both the National Council of SWCS and the SAFECOM Committee and PSEC on the need for a definition of public safety grade from the user perspective at the national level. And it's been pretty warmly embraced, and I probably have spent 3 or 4 hours on just that topic with the staff back in Washington, getting it organized for that particular purpose. But I could go on and talk for a long time, Chair, but I think that covers the highlights of the things that we're all trying to get done here.
Okay.
I'll be happy to take any questions if anyone has any or concerns.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions for Craig? Does Helen have anything to add under the SWCS report? She's on the phone.
Helen?
I'd just like to let the board know that the LTE Public Safety Essentials course was attended by myself and Patrick Updike. It was an educational course. It was public safety centric. There was FirstNet information shared as well. There was attendance from FirstNet personnel. And LTE network is really the marriage of radio technology with broadband technology. So the class is a good opportunity for not only education but outreach for future consideration for the regional interoperability committees. So more to come in a written report for the board. That's all I have.
Thanks, Helen. I know that the APCO and NENA conference and stuff is going on this week as well. I didn't recognize anybody on the phone, obviously, on this oversight on my part, but is Chair Ray for the 911 council report? Are you on the phone? Okay. I guess we'll bypass that. How about, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I attended the meeting, so I
Okay.
could give a very brief overview of their topics.
Okay.
It was last night at 5 o'clock. They held it at Prairie Meadows. Probably the primary topic of discussion got into it was involved with the legislative concerns. They passed a variety of improvements and funding for improving dispatch centers, which was pretty exciting. I think the energies and effort that group puts into that shouldn't go unrecognized. They do really try and bring the centers along in a very positive way. One of the challenges, as we struggled with last year, if you'll recall, was the funding mechanism for the statewide radio system. And that topic has come up again and was a good part of the meeting yesterday. There is a sense that they feel like they were told last year as a group that the funding would not come from the 911 fund, the surplus or the base or whatever. That particular, it seems to be a touchy subject when you say surplus. So I'm trying to stay away from that term, but that's kind of the way it was framed yesterday. And so there was a meeting. I understand there's supposed to be a meeting this morning at 9 o'clock.
I went to that.
And maybe Bob could give us a little update on what the meeting, but their concerns were that there be adequate understanding of what the consequences are if that funding continues to come from that fund and that other sources are not reviewed. And there was a lot of conversation about who they had talked to try and influence and help the understanding of what that might mean to the local PSAP community. They would like to get involved with public education and budget and some other aspects where they have some funding for it, but I think they're having, like many organizations, they have struggled getting enough bandwidth. The people that they have involved are very busy, and they have full-time jobs. And so they're trying to get some outreach going, and I think it will be exciting, and I think some of the things that Training Chair Buckman will talk about will help drive some of that. I think there's a lot of things we can do with the DHS OEC training initiatives to kind of cross-pollinate. Carol has been a big asset in helping us bring those elements together so that we're spending our money wisely and everyone's getting the biggest value added out of it. So that was probably the biggest topic, was them passing and how much, and I don't remember what the numbers were, I didn't outright them down, but they passed a number of budgets, and so there's additional funding coming in to get the systems moving. And then the other major topic was the meeting going on this morning. So if you'll, with your permission, let Bob talk about that.
Okay, thank you. So I attended a subcommittee meeting this morning, from the Committee on Appropriations. They appointed a subcommittee to talk about HF 2439, and that's the E911 bill, is how I would best describe that bill. And they took no official action. The legislative leadership at this subcommittee meeting made it very clear that the legislature had a significant interest in finding a way to fund the state radio system. They'd like to find a way to fund it on an ongoing basis, and they're still trying to find a way to do the ongoing basis, but they're going to try to pass another one-year appropriation of $4.3 million is what I understood Senator Danielson to say. And they're working behind the scenes to firm up support for that action. So that's my report on the meeting at 9 o'clock this morning.
And if I could add to that, one of the areas that was of significant discussion was the fact that there's a bill working its way through, and I guess there's a lot of different bills working their way through, but one of them would raise the fee back to directly to each of the centers to 60% from 46%.
That's this bill.
Okay, and then the other element was that our area of concern was, of the roughly $9 million that's sitting in the fund, let's be careful with that. How does that then get divided among the 117 PSAPs? Does something else happen with it? What is the perspective of the legislature of how that what would happen with that money? And so that was one topic. The other one that I thought was germane, now that you've helped refresh my memory, Bob, is the fact that there was a set aside in there of about $3 million. And that set aside is if a dispatch center gets hit with a tornado, they need money like right now to get back up and running. And that fund was in essence to help make sure that whatever broke could be fixed promptly and not have to go through the typical state procedures of getting approvals and so on and so forth. So there was some discussion about that. And I hope I'll defer to Carol if you have anything to add that I might have missed about. You were there too, as I recall.
The meeting last night, I was not there.
Okay.
I was not able to be
I
there.
think John Benson was on the phone. He was going to say something.
Okay, please.
Yeah, can I ring in on that real quick?
Please.
Sure you can, John.
All right, I just need to because Craig's done a valiant attempt to describe something that's a bit like trying to describe water going through a hose. It's constant. The basic elements of the House File 2439, which Bob is talking about, and then the amendment which the Senate will put upon that bill Monday when they move it out of appropriations on Monday. Correct that the pass-through percentage to the PSAP would go from 46 up to 60%. It does. The question really becomes on the back end of what you do with the leftover money. Does set aside, Craig had the dollar figure right, it's about $3 or $3.5 million for catastrophic, and this is the important part where it separates a little bit from what Craig said. It's related to catastrophic failures within the network. So or if we have a network failure related to data centers or anything like that, we have the cash to get that money. We have the ability to get those things back online as quickly as possible. The new elements that are in there is that it does create consolidation grant that looks at putting money available to the answering points to either physically consolidate or move into a shared services environment. So it does set aside monies to do that. It also does set aside $100,000 for the 911 council, which is similar to what they had last year. And then after that, it allocates monies to the answering points equally after that point in time. The part that is coming in the Senate amendment that is important is that for that carryover money or surplus funds or however you think about it, it would essentially set the amount going out on the back end at $4.4 million. The reason they came up with the 4.4 is when you put the entire revenue, the anticipated revenue stream, which is about $28 million annually, you take the 60% going out to the PSAPs, roughly about 22% that we have in place to operate the network, i.e. the phone bills that the department pays to make the network run. You have about 2.5% that go to wireless carrier cost recovery, and then you have about that 4.4 translates to about 15%. The 4.4 million translates to about 15%. You put those all together, that's about 99.5% of available revenues next year. What it does not do is it does not have us dipping into the existing leftover, and so there would be, we will end up with a dollar figure in the carryover June 30 this year. We would essentially have that same dollar figure June 30 of next year. So it does create the possibility that they could come back and re-look at what that funding stream could look like and if it could support an additional LMR payment next year. That's as of 10:55. Check back at 1 o'clock, check back at 2 o'clock. Things are moving very quickly.
All right, thanks, John. Okay, that was quite a bit of information. Thanks a lot for that, everybody. Moving on to the program manager. Blake, are you on the phone? Not sure if Blake was going to give any more information than what was already given, I'm sure. All right, moving on to the UGC, the User Group Committee, Isicsb board. Chair Buffington, you're on the phone, correct?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
The user group committee continues to roll down the track, support the RICs through their efforts, and see what we can do with a lot of help from Helen Trajanovich, and we're very appreciative of that. Later today, you'll be able to start looking at, and you've already had it, but the memorandum of agreement, what we'll be doing through the UGC and in concert with the RICs after that's been approved is we'll go ahead and start taking that down to the local levels, start getting signatories, and working on educating the locals on that process. We continue to work with the RICs on establishing the points of contact for 2 for each agency by using CHASM, and that's something that gets brought up at pretty much all the different RIC meetings. And then had some really good discussion on LMR. Specifically, we'll be establishing a subcommittee that Rob Dennert will be kind of riding herd on, I guess. But specifically to talk about the unit IDs, the talk group IDs, allocation throughout the entire state, from a statewide perspective down to a regional, down to a county, down to a local municipal. And he's done a really good job, and there's some really good discussion throughout going on regarding that. And also the subcommittee will be looking at fleet mapping, and we've all been involved in some of the detailed design reviews. Craig had mentioned OTAR and OTEP. That was as well. So, after this MOU rolls out, we'll be able to start populating our the UGC, because right now we just have the 6 seats from the RICs, and we're just looking forward to getting some more input on that committee. That's all I have.
Thanks, Andy. Any questions for Andy at all? All right, moving on. Kelly, Finance.
The Finance Committee met last Tuesday, April 5th at 2 p.m. via phone conference, and they reviewed the financials and the maintenance contract proposal for the gear, the 911 gear in Starcom bus in Woodbury County. The financial report that we have is the Sleek Peak grant. That is the $2,070,323 grant that we have from the federal government. This month, we spent $35,353. And recall that out of that dollar amount, 80% is paid for by the grant and 20% by the state. Our state and remaining in that grant is $1,263,198. State appropriation from fiscal year 14 to 2016, we have received $359,898. We have spent $155,539. Available funds, $204,359. And so far in fiscal year 2016, we have spent $62,792. And the Finance Committee did recommend approval for the finances from the board. And they also did recommend that we approve the 5-year maintenance contract suggested by John, or brought to us by John Benson for the Starcom bus in Woodbury County. That would be all that we had on our agenda.
Did, I get, my question, Kelly, is that if they're looking for approval, do we need a motion in front of the board to accept those?
You do need a motion to accept the finance reports.
Okay,
And then I think later on will be John's maintenance contract.
okay. So
For
we're
the
going to talk about that
Starcom.
later on,
I
correct?
believe so.
Okay. So did I hear a motion to accept the?
I so moved to accept the Finance Committee report.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Bob. Any discussion on the finance report?
I have a question. On travel for this Colorado trip, does that need to be under separate action, or should that be part of this action? Separate action?
Let's do a separate
Okay,
action for travel.
thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion on that, finance reports? All those in favor of accepting the finance report as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign? All right, thanks, Kelly. Motion passes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, John?
can we just do since we're talking dollars and cents, can we just do the quote on the 911 gear since we're here?
I would wholeheartedly agree to hearing what you have to say, John. Go ahead.
Okay. As most of you are aware, or maybe not aware, because it's kind of ancient history now, part of the PSIC grant was we put some 911 gear in a mobile facility, so if we did have a catastrophic PSAP failure similar to what we experienced over in Cedar Rapids during 2008, we had a resource in the state that could be deployed and could handle 911 calls. That equipment resides in the Motorola Starcom bus, which is essentially it's the easiest way to say it is it's a complete mobile dispatch center. So there is 911 gear sitting in there. I did get an annual quote from them as well as a 5-year quote. The annual quote was for $4,000, and the 5-year quote was $12,000. I did recommend to the Finance Committee to accept and pay the 5-year quote, and my logic behind that is this: is that while that equipment is aging out, its primary function right now in life would be to answer wireline calls. With next generation 911 being in place, we can ship wireless calls quite literally to any answering point in the state. So we have 113 PSAPs, so each PSAP has 112 backups. With wireline, it doesn't work that way. What is going to happen, though, or we anticipate happening in the near future, is that we're going to do a feasibility study the back half of this year that's going to look at how can we get off of the wireline network and fold all of that traffic into the next generation 911 network. But that process, even with the study being in place, I wouldn't anticipate would get done no sooner than 2, if not 3 years out. So there still would be a need to have this type of capability out there. And if we look at 3 years at $4,000 a pop, that's $12,000. So we might as well get 5 years worth of it in case it takes longer for the same price. and that was my recommendation. So I would move that the board approve the $12,000 maintenance quote provided by Electronic Engineering from Sioux City.
And I would second that. Grosskreutz?
Hearing a motion and a second on that 5-year agreement. Any other discussion on that? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, John. All right, Kelly, do you want to move into the travel requests, or do you want to do that later? The travel requests do you have any travel requests from the Finance Committee?
I have one today from Craig for the Colorado. Is that correct, Craig?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe it was submitted electronically, but probably today while you were traveling, so you don't have the dollar amount.
Correct.
So, Chair Lampy, do you have a dollar amount not to exceed that you would like to request for that?
It was for both of us. I sent a request for both of us on one form. It was around 3,800 total.
So not to exceed 4,000.
And that was figuring high.
Okay.
I would move that we accept that.
It's Sherry Murphy. If Sherry Murphy's in the room, she can confirm that, but I'm sure it was 20 or 38.
Sherry, do you know?
Could have been 28. You remember?
I thought it was the other trip, but it was 38, but it could be correct.
Okay.
For simplicity, could we get approval of not to exceed $4,000?
Exactly.
I will move that we allow Chair Lampy and Swick Allen to attend the Colorado conference in what month? April?
No, it'll be, I believe it's, no, I don't know. I believe it's May. I've got too many meetings coming up.
It's next month.
We will
It's next month during the second week, I think.
Yeah, it's before this meeting, as I recall.
to attend the Colorado meeting next month, not to exceed $4,000.
Okay. There is a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Carol. All right, hearing the motion second. Any other discussion on the travel to Denver? Okay. Hearing none. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign? Okay, motion passes. Moving on. Is there anything else from Finance, Kelly?
That is all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on. Chair Union, Governance.
Thank you, good morning. So the Governance Committee continues to meet monthly, and we talked about several things at the recent meeting, the MOA, which is going to be items 19C and new business. We talked about a skip pocket guide, and we talked about a board committee responsibility document, which Craig pulled out of a golden oldie file from somewhere. And so we'll hear more about those items in the future. Also then like to talk about what my handout was today. And on top of this, the very top thing is going to be an item under new business, a motion that I'm going to make. The next thing in is a policy statement 2015-01. We passed this about a year ago, March 11 of 2015. And this is the policy statement that is becoming more important all the time, actually. And I'd like to point out, we'll talk about maybe a little bit more under new business, but on pages 2 and 3, it's further policy that, and we talk about standing up a user group committee. And Chair Buffington is working on that, and it talks about no more than 18 members and no more than one additional vote per state or federal agency, so it's a potentially a 20-person committee. And this first paragraph talks about ex officio members too that can be on the committee. If we go to page 3, Chair Lampy pointed out a misspelling on here, so the second line, the USG, it should be UGC. And I guess I'd like to suggest my fellow board members don't need a motion to fix that, it's just a misspelling, and we'll correct it. Would that be okay with my fellow board members? Yes. Okay. So this paragraph talks about standing up a committee. And if you notice, the chair shall appoint no more than 3, and it talks about the chair being involved in this. And so this, we need to, it's with the MOAs potentially starting to come in, we need to have this committee become active. And Chair Buffington, you're aware of this document?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So this, we'll be seeing or hearing about some business as far as standing this committee up in the near future. Craig, do you have any comments on this, any other than what I just said?
No.
About this? Okay. The next page I handed out, the last page, are the members of the governance committee. And it's just kind of an FYI. And that ends my report for this part of the meeting, and I'll be back with you on new business, item number 19.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. All right, moving on to operations. Sheriff Camachis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I want to thank Craig and Ellen here and everybody who's kind of carried the burden of me for the last few months. It's great to be back, and this is my broken leg beard, I call it, so just bear with me a little bit about it. There are a number of things that are on the agenda for operations. The four topical areas we'll just touch on today. One is going to be the STR inventory process. Number two is a public-private partnership that we've been working on. And number three is a platform transition process that Craig alluded to a little bit ago. And last is going to be the in-person meeting that the operations committee needs to have. First off, the STR inventory process. I want to thank Helen, who's on, for I know kind of carrying the water on that a little bit. We haven't gotten very far with it at all yet, but we're going to look at some digital inventory process that's going to happen. In order to coordinate all this, we brought somebody on who's interested in working with us and becoming a new committee member. And what I'd like to do is I'd just like to have Cindy Fox stand up, if you would, just kind of let everybody know who you are. Cindy has a background that covers state, county, and local, from everything from Greene County, Atlantic, and now she's with the DPS Des Moines Dispatch, I guess it'd be. And her background is she has an understanding of inventory and process. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to have Cindy really eventually serve as the chairperson of this subcommittee that is going to be working on the STR inventory process. I'll talk with her, myself and Ellen will work with her, and what we will do is we will come up with a vice chair to work with you in the formation of that group. We want to make sure we have good representation, but we want to make sure it's individuals who understand what those trailers consist of, what the gear is, and really so that we can formulate the inventory, so that we can have comparability, so that the three trailers aren't clear out in left field. One of the problems I think that this committee's done is we have kind of three distinctly different trailers. Cindy and I talked about that before. We want to make sure that they can all do the job, whether they go east, west, or north, south, or whatever they're going to be. Also, readiness and maintaining of those trailers is going to be a very great importance. And finally, really the availability process, and that's an ongoing living, breathing process that subcommittee will have oversight and input on. So those are the four things that are going to be going on with that particular issue, and I'm excited to have you come on board. So thank you very much for volunteering for that, Cindy, or being forced into it and being subtle about it. How's that? Public-private partnerships. Another DPS individual, Stephen Ray. Steve, are you on by chance? I didn't know if he joined us later. He got a hold of me before I went ahead and fell, and he offered to chair that particular subcommittee in public-private partnerships too. So we're going to end up with a situation where Stephen is going to be. I'll work with him like I just mentioned about Cindy, and we'll come up with a co-chair or a vice chair for that subcommittee as well. Finally, the platform transition. This is going to be an issue that's going to be extremely important, and Craig alluded to it. But currently we have VHF, UHF, 800, 700 systems out there. And one of the things we're going to have to make sure is that there's consistency so that when there's a need for interoperability and an agency comes to another agency to help out, whether it's a major disaster or whatever other purpose or reason there is, that these units, if you will, these systems can cohabitate and work together. We're going to have to look at the formation of a group that's going to study that as well, so that we can make sure that if a new state radio system migrates and goes into a VHF only area, what do they do? Maybe such things as the type or the scope of the disaster, or the number of people involved, or are we going to have to bring a trailer in, or we need to come through so that when it happens, we don't have to work through it too difficult. So that's going to be a movie in the future. Craig, do you want to talk about that or touch on it a little bit broader? Is there anything?
No, you covered it.
Okay, at this point, it's very, very embryonic and very early. Finally, the in-person meeting. I have talked as a chairperson, and I know Ellen and I have talked about it, and every time something seems to happen, we will have an in-person meeting. We will go over all these topics, and we'll finalize both the subcommittees and some of the other things. My intent would ideally be, if we could do it in May or into the June. I'm going to be right up front with everybody. I'm running for the Board of Supervisors, so my early part of June and frankly May is going to be kind of hectic probably for me. I am going to be retiring at the end of this calendar year from sheriff. Just for I guess a point of personal preference, if I could, Mr. Chair. I have been talking with our state association about somebody to replace me. I don't really know when my term is up. I hate to say that. When you're here forever, it seems like you just migrates from one to the other. But I know that there are two sheriffs, both have technology backgrounds and both have an understanding of radio systems who are being mentioned. And I'll sit down and I'll talk with Chair Lampy and I'll talk with you about this and I'll talk with Craig so we can get a feel for it. And then I'll make a recommendation to our state association. I'm not saying exactly when I'll be leaving here. For sure it'll be the end of the year, but we'll migrate through that. And I'd like to get these subcommittees set up and operations set up. And then I'll hand the gavel over to Ellen and she can become chairperson. So, enough said. I want to thank everybody for this. Tossed it out, STR inventory, public-private partnership, platform transition, and the in-person meeting, probably June-ish if we can. It'll be after the primary, so thank you. Any other questions at all at this point?
Sheriff, if I could weigh in just
please go right ahead.
on the association piece. Just as a reminder, this board is appointed, the positions that are appointed by the governor have to meet certain criteria in that we have to have male, female, and Republican, Democrat balance. And so as we look at the Sheriff's Association, I would encourage you to have multiple, to the degree you can, multiple candidates apply so that there's a way to fit it in and make it work, because as the board gets constructed, it gets more and more complicated for the governor's office to put together that jigsaw puzzle and meet the legal requirements.
One of the virtues of being elected for 29 years, as I understand that system.
Perfect.
And I've thought through it all, as well as the fact that I am a Republican, I'm a male. And I'll make sure that we cover that with the governor's office. But thank you very much for bringing it to my attention.
Well, no, just one general reminder, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay.
Any other questions for Ted?
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the report, Ted. Okay, John, are you still on the phone for Outreach Committee report?
I am.
Okay.
All right.
Sir.
Were you, Craig or Sean, were you guys able to print off that stuff I shot your way this morning?
Sean's working on it. The answer is we can't do it right now.
Okay, not the links I was shooting you. That's not a concern. I shot you a document.
Yes, we have the document that you've sent has been printed out and handed out, I believe. The outreach document, you want me to put it on the screen?
Whatever. Since I can't see it, it doesn't matter to me. So, we'll just do this will be a quick kind of brief where we're at with regard to the outreach effort. And primarily it's going to focus on two issues today. First and foremost, the Isicsb plan in terms of how that outreach is going to get started. As it says on the handout, the initial plan is to do 12 one-hour webinars. And they'll essentially be broken. Our focus will be within each of the 6 regions, but they will be available statewide. So if an individual cannot make one, they can get to another one. 6 of them will essentially be focused on the policy level type of discussions. So that's, like completing the MOA, what are some of the basic questions that your policy people need to understand about, what does the network do, how do you access it, those kind of policy level questions. And then another 6 will kind of focus more on the technical side of things. So your folks that are radio heads can get on there and ask, get some information, some more very pointed stuff that gets into the technology. What we kind of decided to do is put them together do them in a 3-hour time block. So run them 3 of them back to back to back. Run them on those Wednesdays that you see there, the 18th, the 25th, the 1st, and the 8th. So Sean is working with the Motorola team to get the constant contact info in there, so that'll aid the registration process. We will be using, and I forget the technology, but the webinar technology to make that happen. So we will essentially we'll run some tests on it first to make sure that everything goes along merrily, that the presenters are comfortable with using the technology, and that it's appearing correctly to the folks that are going to be the ones watching it. Obviously, the folks that will be the big drivers behind that will be the state deployment staff, and then also folks from the Motorola project team, kind of finalizing what that's going to look like. The webinars will be recorded, and we'll make those available on our YouTube channel, and so you'll be able to find those not only through our the board's website, but kind of the sub-site that which will be under the network site, if you will. Motorola will also have what they refer to as a microsite that will mirror a lot of that type of stuff as well. I will forward some links out to the board members so they can see what the branding is going to look like when those emails kind of go out, and that branding will obviously carry over into presentations and all of kind of the electronic materials that we'll use with regard to the network. Unique color schemes uses the logo, so it will be instantly recognized when you do see it that, yeah, this is related to the Isicsb platform. So we'll have that. That was actually item number 2 that's on there. The third item is working with our departmental staff to essentially secure a track at the annual conference, which is October 12th and 13th. Thus far, the first 2, the update on the Isicsb platform and then the CASM Next Gen stuff is approved, and I'm also working with Rick on the FirstNet one. Rick is interested in possibly having a national person or regional level person participate that as well. So that October, it'll either be on the 12th or the 13th, but we'll have a separate breakout sessions where we can have those 3 sessions run back to back to back. For the most part, that concludes my report for the month.
John, this is Craig. We were able to put the link together for the document that you sent us. Do you want to open one of those up, or you want to hold that till next month?
If you want to throw one up on the screen, go ahead. That's perfectly fine.
Okay. Can you see what we see?
I don't have you guys up on. Can you just click on the first one?
Yes, I believe so. Communication knows no boundaries. Register today. Iowa Interoperable Statewide. That's the one that's up.
Yep, so what you'll see is that's kind of going to be what the branding looks like in terms of this color scheme, and with the logo being in the upper left corner as you go. There'll be multiple versions of that type of email that will get the registrations going for the webinars. You'll see that same type of color scheme morph into the actual webinar presentation. You'll see that with regard to the microsite, and we'll use some of the same color schemes as we move into putting like an FAQ on the Isicsb website, those type of things. That's just kind of a reference point. Some of the language will probably get changed a little bit, and it has a variety of different messages they're trying to convey depending on the email. And we will fire those out to darn near every POC that Sean has buried away inside his contact database. So it will be distributed as widely as we can possibly make it. And that will drive, so we should have a good idea of what we're looking at in terms of webinar numbers, because people will have to go through the registration process to get into the webinar. So that'll give us a good idea impact, so we can kind of track where we're getting registrations from, where we're not, and work on filling in the blanks. It'll give us an idea of what we're working.
John, this is Craig.
So thank you for that hard work again.
I noticed on the presentations that there's no opportunity to call if you have problems. Is there a resistance to putting a phone number on that to call?
No, we're not even that far down the road yet.
Okay, I think we should do that. People will be pretty benevolent about calling, but if there's a challenge with it, we can either put the general number or you can put my phone number down as SWIC for the, if questions call. I'm fine with that.
Okay, fair enough.
That's all.
Good. Okay. All right, moving on. Thanks, John. Moving on. Sean Wagner, the FirstNet Outreach Specialist. I'm glad that he's actually showing me anybody that we're going to have come up and speak from the audience today. I mean, you're going to have to use the podium. Sorry. So sorry, John Tell. Sorry, Shweta. So I know how you love doing that, but Sean, go ahead and show them how it's done.
All right, well, I don't know about that, but I'll give it my best.
Okay.
So as far as FirstNet outreach, we've been continuing to do the CHASM point of contact updates. Hopefully you're all seeing that. Hopefully you're seeing the map and how it's changing colors. We are currently working with the RICs now. We've engaged the RICs. Now, just so everyone understands, we're using the EMAs, the 911 points of contact, as well as the RIC contacts, as well as PSAP contacts. That's who we reached out, as well as our friends like Carol in the training and certification components of the state. So this database is coming along, I would have to say, optimistically well. I don't want to oversell, but we will have one contact for nearly every agency and additional agencies. So this is very exciting because this is emails and phone numbers. As far as FirstNet outreach, we've started looking at how we're going to further engage volunteer systems. SWIC Allen, myself, and Deputy SWIC Troyanovich are discussing more outreach in the volunteer areas. Beyond that, training and then training videos. Later on today, we're going to be shooting a ComL, ComT, just kind of a what are these? And I'll let Tom talk a little bit about that as well. So that's the summary to my report.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. Moving on to the Training and Exercise Committee, Sir Tom Buckman.
All right, thank you. First of all, I really like this new venue. Because after seeing my friend Sheriff Camachis, it reminds me how much more handsome I am than he is. If I could have the SWIC and the Vice Chair and Cindy Fox come forward for a presentation. And you may not be able to get this on camera.
Hey, get over to the podium.
We could do it at the podium, sure. So Cindy Fox with the Department of Public Safety has met all of the requirements to be credentialed as a communications unit leader. She even went a step beyond that. And once she became credentialed, went through the course again just to brush up on skills and get the new information. So I would like to present this to Cindy and congratulate her on her hard work of becoming a credentialed communications unit leader. And we'll have a photo op after the meeting. So congratulations.
Thank you. Cindy, thank you for all your work. Thank you so much.
That's why she's on our committee.
Yeah. And then I do have a couple other things to report. As Sean mentioned, we will be shooting a video this afternoon to look at the positions within the communications unit, particularly the communications unit leader and communications technician. And it's just going to be a advertisement type piece and an opportunity to share what those positions are within the ICS structure, and can be used for various promotions for ComL and ComT. So we're looking forward to that. Wally Walser with Cedar Rapids Fire and I will be interviewed as part of that, and Sean will put it together very professionally. We're even doing it in a studio. I thought we were just going to do it out in the hallway here. So we're expecting some great things out of Sean for that. A couple things that we have going on in our committee. The Next Gen 911 workshop is kind of in Blake's court right now, working on the finalization of the agenda and logistics for that. The incident dispatcher course, we've had an initial scoping call, and we are working on the logistics for that. Don't have the dates yet, and we're anticipating hopefully by the end of September, because they'll probably go into continuing resolution 1st of October. So we hope to have that completed by the end of September. So more on that as we have it. We will be hosting a Region 7 Communications Technician Train the Trainer course here in West Des Moines the week of September 12th. That is an invitational course, by invitation by the SWIC, and we anticipate 2 people from each of the Region 7 states to participate in that. It's something new. Communications Technician Train the Trainer has been around for a while, but this type of course is different in that, to my knowledge, we've never had a regional approach. So something new, and that is all because of the hard work of Jim Lundstedt to put that together. So we will have representation from Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas in that course the week of September 12th. And that is it for the training. The last thing that I have, this is my last meeting. And I officially retired July 5th, but my last day of work is next Tuesday. I have truly appreciated and enjoyed my time on Leatac since 1990, and the transition from Leatac into the Isicsb. And it's kind of interesting to think about interoperability. When I joined Leatac in 1990, our solution to interoperability statewide was the Iowa channel. And we spent months on putting that plan together because we had to go through a lot of licensing procedures and agreements with DNR because it's actually a forestry channel. And just to see where we've come from that point by having one channel for interoperability in this state to a statewide system is absolutely fantastic to watch. So thank you all very much, and I'll hopefully continue to be on the Education and Training Committee. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Tom. If I could, because you brought it up so graciously, can I have you step back forward to the podium, sir, for a presentation of your own?
Mine's framed, Cindy.
You know, when I first got on the Isicsb board, Tom actually reminded me how old he is because he went to the academy with my dad. Yes. So I really appreciate that information, Tom. And I'm talking on behalf of the board as well as everybody, every agency and individual in the state of Iowa for all your hard work and talents that you've been given to the Isicsb board. I would like to present you with this plaque, a certificate of appreciation.
Well, thank you very much.
So for all your hard work. So thank you very much, sir.
Appreciate it.
So
Thank
you, Craig.
Thank you. You deserve it.
Thank you.
I think I speak for everybody here that big shoes to fill on the training and exercise committee, and hopefully we'll find somebody else to be able to do it just as well as you are. So
sounds good.
And you have. So.
I'd like to chime in on that for just a minute. Right after I got here, a little over 2 years ago now, I guess 2 years this month, April, we broke, training and exercise was part of outreach, and we separated that, and you agreed to take on the chairmanship of that. And I have to say that from my perspective, you've exceeded any of the wildest expectations I had of what we might be able to achieve in 24 months. The fact that we've got Train the Trainer, you guys took serious the initiatives to try and get us a COML, a COMT in each county, and then double that if possible. The way we're set up in Iowa, that is just so critical until we get this statewide system up, and then even then, it will still have value. Jim Lundstedt has shared with us a number of incidents that have gone down where we just run out of people in other states, and I think that we'll be positioned to not have that happen that really falls on you. I mean, Tom, that's just been a fantastic job of what you. I have to say that from my perspective, you've exceeded any of the wildest expectations I had of what we might be able to achieve in 24 months. The fact that we've got train the trainer.
Knew the day would come when God would speak correctly.
Oh, God, hey, Craig said's big enough. I wouldn't call him God. You're up there, Craig, but you know.
Until we get this
Obviously, we're having some technical difficulties here, and
They don't know that's going on.
Is this where the little target comes out?
we have some playback issues going on, fellas.
In other states, and I think that we'll be positioned to not have that happen. That really falls on you.
It's really nice when Craig can listen to himself speak. We all know that.
No, it's 2 minutes behind. I finished talking.
And it just started.
For the loudspeaker.
We had to listen to it twice.
Which was good because we weren't listening the first time.
You know, when you think about it, it kind of made like you've been here 4 years.
It just feels that way, Sheriff. It just feels that way.
Anyway, Isicsb. All right.
That was it. I mean, I thought that it was important that everybody recognize how much ground Tom's picked up in that training area, which literally was flat when we started. So he's got a heck of a committee, and a lot of people have gotten involved with it. And I think it's one of our board's probably best practices. So it's exciting, and I really do personally hope that you stay involved with it because you bring a lot to the table. And I know you live and eat, breathe training. So hopefully you'll stay engaged.
Plan to.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Tom. All right. Patrick Updike, you still on the phone? Time for your technology committee report.
Yes, I am here. Thank you. First off, kudos to the technical group there to set up the video.
Way before that.
Really good quality on this end.
Unbelievable.
And so kudos to those people for setting that up. On the March 15th and 16th, I attended the webinar for Public Safety LTE Essentials. Very good class. The professor, if you will, knew quite a bit about how this LTE system operates. We went through various aspects of how the end user device basically powers up and connects to the system, how it's routed, the various means of how the different functions that are on that device operate, and we also covered some of your quality of service issues, transmission methods. For example, your OFMDA transmission methods, proximity services. Just went through the whole thing, and it was enough to. It was very. Your head would pretty much explode after going through this class, but I found it very informative and would suggest that anybody who has an opportunity to take this type of class, they really should jump in and do that. So that was, like I said, on March 15th and 16th, 4 hours, 2 days. So that's it for that one. The technology committee met on March 31st. The first item was the point-to-point procedure 2015-04A, which Craig has already touched on. We went ahead and adopted that, had the documentation properly populated for the website. That information was forwarded on to Sherry Murphy, and she updated the web page. I know Rob Coppert has a frequently asked questions document that he's pushed out because there was some questions, as Craig said, about how to implement some of this procedure. From from what we've heard so far, most of the comments have been positive to get this issue resolved and set aside. So, thanks to Rob Coppert for handling that, and thanks to all of the technology committee for helping get this procedure put in place so that we can move on to other things. The next agenda item was next steps for interoperability channels with regards to NIFOG and IFOG. This is going to take some time to deal with because you're talking about interoperability channels within the state of Iowa as well as nationwide. We'll have to expand on this further because some of the concerns that were brought up were the public notice that the Isicsb board put out for January 1st, 2014, which shows the minimum interoperability channels for the state of Iowa for VHF, UHF, 700, and 800. And at the time that was adopted, some of the issues that we see is that you don't have CTCS tones for your VFire 21, VLaw 31, VMed 28, and so if you were to relate that to the current NIFOG handbook, you've got certain frequencies that exist within this document that was put forward by the Isicsb board that does not address that. So we want to research the interoperability channels and possibly create an IFOG/NIFOG in the coming days, but further research and discussion needs to be had for that. So more to come. The final agenda item was some of the discussions and meetings regarding the P25 land mobile radio system. Fleet mapping was a huge topic in how to move forward with that. The final discussion was we looked at a mathematical equation that I'm sure some of you have seen that Rob Dennert has developed that calculates the number of talk groups and things of that nature based on population levels of a specific area. And so that's when we took that document that Rob Dennert had and we pushed it out to Andy Buffington of the user group committee so that they can discuss that more as a possibility to maybe come up with an idea or use this idea that Rob Dennert has developed as a means for standardizing possibly the first steps in fleet mapping a system. So hopefully we'll have some more information later on as that moves forward. That's it for all of that. I just want to go back and also advise that as a part of Agenda Item 1, as it pertains to the point-to-point procedure, that information was also sent out to Jim Lundstedt, so he had a current copy of all of that information. So that's it from Clarinda, Iowa. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Moving on to the FirstNet subcommittee. Chantel, please.
Morning.
Morning.
I'm just providing an update on behalf of FirstNet Broadband Committee Chair Rick Lombard, who's at the FirstNet SPOC meeting today. The FirstNet Broadband Committee has put together an internal working group called the FirstNet Opt-in, Opt-out Task Force. The task force is researching the FirstNet options just to ensure that the state of Iowa has all the information as we move closer to a presentation with the governor. In the last meeting, the FirstNet Broadband Committee voted to move oversight and administration of the CHASM database to the Isicsb board. So the committee seeks approval from the board to move CHASM oversight to either a subcommittee or one of the committees. And the ICN Security Bureau will continue to support CHASM efforts as it relates to FirstNet, LMR, and any other assignments. So should we do the motion now for the approval for that, or?
Well, that was what, could you explain that again as far as for everybody?
The committee just voted to move CASM to the Isicsb board, just for oversight. So we were wanting the chair or the co-chair to move it to maybe a subcommittee or a committee of the Isicsb board.
Okay. Tom, are you on the phone?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll have Rick explain that.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Rick Lombard. The decision to move CASM out of the FirstNet Broadband Committee was made because due to the expansive nature of CASM, even beyond the demand of the FirstNet data, was far more reaching than the scope of the FirstNet Broadband Committee. The purpose of the FirstNet Broadband Committee is very narrow in the context of FirstNet, and CASM has already kind of outgrown the scope of the FirstNet Broadband Committee, and the committee felt unanimously it would be better served to be administrated at the greater Isicsb board level.
Okay, but not as a subcommittee of the technology committee, again, another subcommittee of the technology committee, or would that be better suited maybe underneath the UGC?
It really didn't matter to the FirstNet Broadband Committee where the responsibility was. It's really just a system, and so oversight or guidance toward how Iowa utilizes the CASM system in a broad strategy we felt would be better suited to be addressed by the greater Isicsb board.
Okay.
So the board organizes around the 7 committees, and I think maybe what we do is table this for a month, let the committee chairs decide where that lands, and then take action on that next month.
I was about ready to say that as far as tabling that. So
be my recommendation. So thank you for the.
No problem.
Unless there's anybody here that thinks any differently, I think we'll just table that until next month. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Just a few other updates related to FirstNet. FirstNet 2016 consultation efforts are underway. FirstNet will attend the May 3rd FirstNet Broadband Committee meeting that will be held at 1 p.m. in the Orem Pape building, just a part of the 2016 team consultation efforts. FirstNet will also be visiting the Isicsb board meeting in July to coincide with the National Governors Association visit. And lastly, the FirstNet RFP submission deadline has been extended from May 13th to May 31st, 2016. And that concludes my update for Rick.
Thank you, John Tell.
Thank you.
Any questions for John Tell?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment, and hopefully the CIO will have some thoughts on this as well. But when I attend the National Council of SWIC meetings and calls, I hope the people in the room understand that most states are not as developed and mature in the FirstNet initiatives, nor as elegant in getting the work done. So to the chair and co-chair of that subcommittee, my hat's off to you. You guys are getting a great deal of energy and traction on something that is still conceptual and not really something you go out and put your hands around. And so I just think that group needs to be recognized because it's significant what's happened.
I concur. Okay, thanks, Chantel. Okay. All right, moving on to other reports. Any information sharing amongst the board members? I know, Helen, that you had something, if you're still on the phone, if you're not in Cherokee at this time. Any other information sharing amongst the board members? You bet, Ellen, go ahead.
Well, I'm wearing my red coat today because the governor signed into law the bill that provides that carbon monoxide detectors will be in multi-family dwellings and voluntarily in single family. So we firefighters are hoping that everybody gets their carbon monoxide. So it was nice to attend that this morning. And Don Johnson grew up 4 miles from where I live. His daughter died in an apartment building in Colorado, no carbon monoxide. So he has made that his mission in Colorado, Nebraska, now Iowa, have the law. He's headed to North Dakota to work on it. So kind of fun to see a neighbor working on that.
Yes. Very much. All right, thank you, Ellen.
Mhm.
Helen, are you on the phone? Okay, I know she was busy. Moving on to the Department of Homeland Security, Jim Lundstedt, please.
Good morning, sir. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to attend your last couple of board meetings, so my list of topics is unfortunately about 9 things, but I will do my best to be brief. First off, the National Emergency Communications Plan included a lot of elements looking at the whole community of communications, including alerts and warnings and 911. OEC, the 1st of April, date not coincidental, released a new document called the Next Generation 911 Cybersecurity Primer. We've shared that with the SWICs, and I will share it with Blake if you haven't already, Craig. It is just simply a very basic self-assessment guide to begin thinking beyond the PSAP as a closed or internet isolated community as we move towards Next Gen 911. And the ability to handle things such as text, but more importantly, the things that come with pictures, video, documents, all those little furry animals that hide in the background. We want the 911 community to be thinking beyond just how do I get this in the door? It's going to be more, how do I control? We had a very interesting discussion on this very topic Saturday at a National Weather Service conference in Quincy, where emergency managers and folks who use a feature called NWS Chat to talk real time with the Weather Service, they want to be able to send pictures. Well, the Department of Commerce immediately said, not yet, not now. We can't deal with the cyber threats. So the same thing will be facing you as a 911 center operator. Tom did his usual masterful job of covering TA, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. I do have 2 quick updates. We were successful in securing approval to bring a communications unit exercise train the trainer effort to the region. That was requested by Kansas. We're going to convert that to a regional offering where we can train a couple of students from each of the 4 states on the process of scheduling and executing a COML exercise. Iowa has had 2 of those in the past 3 years, but the point is those are very expensive and difficult. When you bring us feds into the room, you're now pulling 2 trailers and all of the overhead. We want to increase the capability and resilience of the states to execute that on their own. The training includes how to develop the exercise in the HSEP, the Homeland Security Exercise Evaluation Program format, and we will bring the master trainer, Mike Paulette, and his team in to conduct the class. The Mid-America Regional Council in Kansas City has agreed to host that. We will hold our scoping call for that next week from Friday, and I've invited Tom on behalf of the board to participate, to listen in and kind of understand where we're going with that. We think between having communications unit leader trainers, COMT trainers, and COMX trainers in the region, this will make us more versatile and adept at conducting these exercises on demand. Kansas is also going to be hosting an auxiliary communicator workshop sometime this spring. We're just now in planning. That is the group of amateur radio technicians, if you will, or operators who assist emergency managers. And we will offer that empty seats to Iowa as well. I believe Illinois has a workshop on that same topic in May. If there's anybody interested, Craig has information on that. Would like to share a quick update on text to 911. We've been working fairly extensive with the Kansas City urban area on text to 911, a little more so than most of the states. They went live region-wide, 9 counties, 42 PSAPs in February of this year. They have developed a guide, a little trifold guide called Important Tips for Sending Text to 911. And they have a website that they're using for public education. I spoke about this yesterday in St. Louis. It seems like it's timely to share the information, and if any of you represent an entity that's thinking about or has just implemented text to 911, That information is available, and the Kansas City region would be happy to share their experience and information if of interest. Talking about exercises and training, I will tell you that in the last couple of months, I've been reminded several times how efforts of the Iowa Isicsb continue to lead not only the region, but the nation in certain areas. In the last couple of months, I've spoken on encryption policy and getting ahead of the tidal wave behind us. I'm speaking in Salt Lake next month. I'll be speaking in Washington the month after that. What we're finding is technology is not the enemy of interoperability, but technology run amok is. Even within the federal government, we find, oh, we can't talk because we have encryption keys that are misnamed. So the operator says, oh, wait, I don't have IOAES 27. So getting ahead of this, having standards and policies that help protect your user community as you grow bigger and bigger, that's been a very positive thing. I shared the Iowa policy statement just yesterday afternoon with the St. Louis Urban Area Security Group, the St. Louis Stars, and they're interested in learning a little more. In terms of one of OEC's long-standing outreach tools, the NIFOG, everybody's heard of the NIFOG. We are down to the nubbins on version 1.5, was printed in 2015. We actually have a new version online called NIFOG 1.6.1. It is only available on the website right now. We ran into printing problems because of the continuing resolution at the beginning of this year. And we have continued to fight internally with how this document, because it is both a web document and a printed document, we have all kinds of rules involving 508C compliance and you name it, that make it very hard to print. Task order was issued last week. I was in DC, and we are going to be printing a small run, and I say a small run, of about 15,000 NIFOG 1.6.1s this year. 1.7 is already in development. Because the technology is transitioning so fast, we have developed what we call the e-NIFOG. It's an electronic copy of the NIFOG that runs on your smartphone. It is still in beta, and we are working on an internal issue with our Office of General Counsel about how that may be released. Tom Buckman and I both have the app. We have a very limited number of seats in the iPhone and Android category. If you're interested in being a beta tester, get with me after the meeting. On the subject of, I heard you mention the word IFOG. I'm assuming that would be an Iowa Field Operations Guide. Your neighbors in Kansas just developed an Kansas FOG. They do not have the money to print right now, but they will be the beta tester for an OEC-developed smartphone app. I'm an operator and I don't believe in apps solving my problem in the field. I've never had to put a battery in the NIFOG or had an issue that I dropped and broke the cover. But the reality is quick distribution and maintenance of these things does require something a little more agile than a print task order. We're working right now with Kansas to determine the mechanism to turn the source code over to them to have their own app. They want us to build it, but there's an internal discussion about when we are done with it, we have to turn it over to the state who accepts it as is, where is, and agrees to maintain it. Because otherwise we end up in a very, very lengthy life cycle battle. I believe that's the highlights of what I have. I will mention that we're going to try to work on getting the location and dates nailed up for the incident dispatch course that Tom briefed. And I couldn't be looking forward more than to attending the ComT Train the Trainer the first couple of days of that coming up here in West Des Moines. With that, if Tom and the chair would come forward, I have a brief presentation for Mr. Buckman on behalf of the department.
Definitely the winner.
I left my boot behind. Tom, on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Emergency Communications, and our Interoperable Communications Technology Assistance Program, present you this challenge coin, sir.
Thank you very
As a
much.
recognition of your years of support and hoping to work with you in the future as we continue to develop your ComL, ComT, and Oxcom trainees.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
He does know that he has to carry that everywhere he goes. right?
Yes, it could get really expensive.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes, sir.
All right, moving on to the project manager for Motorola. I see Melvin's not here, but somebody will be.
I do have a presentation I need to bring up on the screen.
Okay. Let me grab.
It's there.
All right. Pulled up. Okay. My name's Nick. Good morning. My name's Nick Putman, filling in for Melvin. Melvin got stuck in jury duty today, so I'm not sure if he's going to get assigned to a case and he's going to be gone for a month or two, or you know, we can only hope that he gets done in one day. So what I'd like to talk about is where we are today. So I think Melvin has presented some of this in the past. We are still in our system engineering detailed design review. That is the highlighted box that is flashing. What we've accomplished to date, we've held 4 DDRs. There are more planned, and I think Craig touched on it a little bit, the operability, interoperability, the management of the system. Our next key step here is to get an updated design meeting put together that we're going to document all the changes and everything that is.
How about that?
Everything that is changed and some of the decisions that were made in our prior DDRs. So we're basically going to refresh everything and put it out and make sure everyone's on board. And this is how the system's going to look as we move forward. We are still working with the NGA items, working on the operational needs of how we're going to support that. We're also working on the physical equipment needs and the location of where that equipment will be placed. Okay, next item, a brief update on is the site development. We are currently in the site development process, and the next couple of slides here kind of highlights where we are. Where we just, a little highlight there is the structural analysis. Is there some of the key points, some of the progress that has been made? We are running structural analysis on current towers. We are starting to get some of these items back. A lot of these towers are passing, and the ones that are not passing, we're moving into the modification analysis to determine what is required for that tower to handle the additional loading for the new network. So we're getting pretty close there. Another item, another highlighted item is we have been working with the different power companies. We do have a lot of power plans. They're not finalized, but we do know where the power is coming from, how we're going to get it, and how we're going to build the site. So we're making a lot of progress there. Next slide here is just the other regions. These is regions 4, 5, and 6. Once again, a lot of the power plans have been completed, or we're getting a good understanding of that. We are putting together our first round or updated construction drawings that we'll be looking for approval from with the different regions. You know, if we move the tower to a different part of the property, we're looking to get that locked down so we can move forward. And then the last, or another piece here is that's the structural. A couple items to point out here. Region 6, we've had a lot of those structurals for the co-locations have gone through. They've been approved, or they've passed. And the ones that have not, we are now in the modification analysis, but we are making some good progress on that. Just wanted to point that out as our update. And then last but not least are some of the key actions we'll be working on. First one is we're gonna start the zoning process with all the sites that we identified as a possible zoning issue that we may require a variance. We are expecting to have state assistance on that. We should be starting on that real soon. So hopefully next update, we'll have a lot more progress and we'll have a lot more of that kicked off. And we can start locking down the locations. Once we're locked at these locations, we will go through and start our formal microwave path surveys. We've been holding back on that for now until the sites get locked. If you're going east and west on a lot of these sites, if one of those sites would change, it could require a different path. So until we get locked, we can't go too much farther down that road. We're going to continue the system engineering DDR, as I talked about. It'd be more of a design refresh. We're going to start installation for the to support the NGA. We do know where those sites are going to be, and we're going to start putting hardware in place. And then last but not least, the team is still working on preparing the first core, first Isicsb core for installation. And we're planning to have that ready and in place for the NGA. That's all I had. Thanks for your time.
Thanks,
I
Nick.
have a question. Stephen, weren't we supposed to be receiving a critical path chart to update the board with on a monthly basis? Okay, so next time when you come back, we'll be looking forward to seeing that to get some idea. It's easy to talk about these things, but I don't think the audience nor the board gets an understanding of when we hit a critical path point and it moves out a deadline.
Okay.
So during the contract negotiations and subsequent to that, there's been an agreement that we would have that for the board meetings. And so just would like to make sure that that's achieved.
Okay.
Yeah, part of the reason for that delay was preparing for.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We do have this tracked in a project plan. That's no problem. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Nick? Okay, thanks. All right, turning it over back to governance, Mr. Uni. Old business.
Okay, thank you. So first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is a document that's in front of you. It's titled, titled Approve Isicsb, and then it's got a date, Memorandum of Agreement. So I'd like to talk about the Memorandum of Agreement process. We've talked about this before. I'd like to describe what the governance committee has done, and then we'll talk about what action I'll ask you to take today, or at least discuss taking today. So the first thing I'd like to point out is that we have a governance committee vote to recommend moving the memorandum of agreement to this board for discussion and potential approval. But I would like to point out that the document in front of you is not the document that the committee voted upon. And I'd like to point out to you what those differences are. I think they're not substantial, but I'll let you draw your own conclusion. So the first difference I'd like to point out is on page 2. Paragraph 1.5. And the second part of that section that starts off ICS. If you go to the right along that sentence, it starts off ICS is more specifically described. The document that the committee looked at just said it had the 700 megahertz in it, and this one has 700/800. So that's the first difference. I think that's not a real substantial change. Page 8 is the next change I'd like to point out. On page 8, section 8.6, there's an added sentence at the end of that paragraph. The 8.6 starts off user in all caps and goes on. The last sentence has been added from what the board, what the governance committee approved. Reactivation should not be unreasonably withheld. Okay, not sure what that means, but it's an added sentence. On page 10 is another change from what the committee approved. Down at the bottom of that page in 11.1, the third line, a sentence that starts all amendments and addendums. So and addendums is added. That was not in the original looked at. Then on page 11, At the bottom of the page, the paragraph that starts off, "in witness hereof." Third line down, memorandum of agreement, did say previously memorandum of understanding. That's been changed to memorandum of agreement. So it's my thoughts that the agreement that the governance committee voted on is substantially the same as this. Does anybody have any thoughts about that you'd like to share, or disagreement? Okay. So that's what I have for item 19A. And when the committee talked about this, I said, let's not wordsmith this thing because we have attorneys looking at it. And, lay people such as ourselves, you change one word and pretty soon, the lawyers are getting all bent out of shape and want to go back, and you know how that stuff is. So we have the document that we're going to be talking about a little bit more today, and it kind of is what it is. The governance committee gave this conceptual agreement to move it on to the board with the thoughts that this agreement will serve our purposes to get the system stood up. And there's a potential that it may change later, but this is what we have for now. Any thoughts on that or any discussion you'd like to have on that? It's a start. Okay.
So would now be appropriate time to talk about the process for this, perhaps?
Well, can we do that under C, please?
Sure.
Well, do you think it belongs here better?
The point I wanted to make is that this document that we're asking the board to approve, we do not see or envision at this time any changes to this document. So that as new users come on, there would be an attachment, an amendment, if you will, that goes on the back that would articulate any changes that user felt needed to go on and that the state could agree to and that the vendor could agree to is attached on the back. So you as board members will not be asked to reread all 11 pages of this again. You'll be given a one, perhaps two-page document that will make amendments to this master, if you will, master MOA. That was the intent of it. I just wanted to clarify that, but so that our board members didn't think that they're going to be getting an 11 to 15 page document to reread for 15, 20 different users wanting to come on.
Okay. To Craig's point, Craig is absolutely correct. So when I had some slight involvement when the lawyers were working on this, and I was really kind of surprised to hear that our attorneys were very much in favor of or thought it was useful to have an addendum process for this master agreement or this master memorandum of agreement because it's very likely that different people will have different views over what they want to be in their agreement. And as long as they're not significant changes, from our point of view, if there's some minor changes, I think that'd be fine from our attorney's point of view. So I'm just echoing what Craig said. I think
Mr. Chair,
Craig.
Just for a point of clarification, if I might, two things. 700/800 and the addition of the 800 to it. The system is a 700 megahertz system, correct? Is there do we know why that was added to it? I'm just curious.
There may be users in the future that wish to add because they may run, I can't imagine this happening, but let's just say that we run out of space in 700 megahertz based on the state plan. 800 megahertz channels could be licensed and operated in the TDMA mode. That's why that change was made.
Okay.
Is that if we reach a point where, let's just say, Marshall County and Marshall City and 15 other groups in that area all decide they want to come on and it exceeds the capacity of 700 megahertz, they could go out and license 800 and we don't have to redo the agreement.
Okay, that's one thing. The second thing was this document that's, if it's approved today by the board, we have a tradition, and I don't know if it's appropriate for this type of a document, but that is to take something and approve it to be posted for feedback. Is there a reason that wouldn't happen now? Is this timeliness involved, or we don't want other people to have input onto it, or is there not input necessary? Usually we would put it on our site for feedback for 30 days or something like that.
That's true for a policy statement.
Yep.
Where the board is making a policy. In this instance, this is a legal document that the Attorney General requires involvement in with a bid contract, which is, my understanding, then makes it demonstrably different because all of that was posted and done up front. So the board action on this is now the DAS awarded it. And now the shifting is to the board, and to the board, it goes to Department of Transportation and DPS. Now, I'm certainly not an attorney, and I may have this wrong, but that was my understanding, because there was some discussion about whether or not it would need to be posted, and my understanding is we were advised that that was not a requirement, that through the resolution process, we can adopt this, and that this document, since it's been through the Attorney General's office, would represent then the interest of the board in compliance with the contract that we have with the vendor and our ability to operate within the scope of that.
Well, I'm fine, I just want to make sure it gets answered, because I would say policy statements are also legal documents from this board, so I understand. I just want to make sure it was a matter of record in case the question comes up later on.
But just so you know, Sheriff, there was no intent to be clandestine. There was the question about those conversations and did it make sense? And ultimately this, if it's approved by the board, that's the first thing that happens. This gets popped up on the website as the MOA.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
And also to kind of chime in on that, the way it was explained to me as well, Ted, and how I would explain it to anybody else that would ask me questions about it is that this, if it's approved today, would be essentially a boilerplate, and to make sure that every potential user that's out there has the ability to, talk, negotiate with this memorandum of agreement in order to better fit their needs. And that this is not a catch-all, and this is what they have to adhere to. All, obviously the language in here that they would have to agree to it before they would get on the system. So just a boilerplate that they could fit to their needs.
One thing that concerns me, just enters my thought process, is when you say 700, 800. If somebody has an 800 system now, are they going to migrate it over, or are you going to utilize 7 primary and 800 becomes just overflow? As you start to expand across the state, I'm just, that just, you're here or there, it just enters my thought process.
The reality of the pool is the state frequencies, the state pool has been dedicated to the system. And so that's what the design was around. Then there are local pool channels, 700 and 800 megahertz. And in the discussions, it made sense that you have access to both. So, I mean, if there's, I don't know what I'm missing here, Sheriff.
No, you're fine. I just want to have some discussion on it, because we're 800 system, and I just want to know what kind of bearing this would have on that, if at all.
Okay, so conceivably then, at that juncture, the way you've just described it wouldn't, but could your P25 radios that have, Harris radios that have the capacity to be one channel FDMA, another channel TDMA, that you could have a single radio that would operate on 2 separate systems depending upon where your officer was at that given time. So if you send somebody to another part of the state, that radio that they've got would work in that area is sort of what our vision might be for operations and that interoperability piece that you talked about earlier. So what happens then is if, I don't know, Council Bluffs or here in Polk County, where we end up, hey, we run out of frequencies in 700. Everybody's now what do you do? Well, so you got an 800 pool sitting there. Why couldn't we use those?
Sure. Good. Thank you.
So I'm looking for further discussion on this memorandum of agreement. And the next step, if there is no further discussion, I am going to move adoption of this.
Any other further discussion on this? Any questions for Bob or anything from the committee? A lot of work went into that.
Okay, so I passed out what I intend to propose for a motion, and wrote it down, and I'm going to read it now. So, Mr. Chair, my motion is, as written here, the Iowa Statewide Interoperable Communications Systems Board, ISICSB, adopted the Iowa Statewide Interoperable Communications System, ISICS, as a statewide radio system by approving Policy Statement 2015-01. The ISICSB, as a board, adopts and recognizes this Memorandum of Agreement, MOA, as the ISICSB's instrument to be used between the ISICSB and all users of the ISICS. Furthermore, The ISICSB directs the User Group Committee, USG, to develop and authorize procedures to be used by all applicants who request to become users of the ISICS.
Thank you for the motion. Do I hear a second? Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Any further discussion on the motion and a second? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting this signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Bob. Continue.
Okay, the next item, I'm going to turn over to Craig for discussion.
Next item is Woodbury, Wisconsin. Got it, okay. So take a little walk backwards now. For several months, since the system was awarded to the vendor, the background is that those parties that chose to bid on the state system were required to incorporate in their design and proposal back to the state entities of existing infrastructure within the state of Iowa. And I've summarized in just a very few words of several sections in a contract. To that end, the selected vendor, in this instance Motorola, had incorporated Woodbury County and Westcom as part of their design to save the statewide systems money. Other vendors included other entities, but in this was the solution that was awarded. And so in recognition of that, we've talked about this several times, and I want to remind the board that Westcom's footprint and Woodbury's footprint is part of the initial design plan for the system, and that they are expected to be, maybe Craig's term would be primary users of the system, as opposed to an applicant who doesn't have a radio system and would like to become part of the system. So it's not anything more than that, but that as we look at bringing Woodbury and Westcom and a migration onto the system, there would be a need for the board to recognize their amendment and recognize that there wasn't a procedure or a process that they went through similar to the UGC, because we're already past that. We were past that when we awarded the RFP, if that makes sense. I hope it does make sense. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has at this time about what the next step is. So the first step was coming up with a document that entities can sign that's been recognized by the Attorney General as acceptable and then could be passed by the board as acceptable. That's now happened. The next step is we have two primary users, Westcom and Woodbury, who are currently reviewing and assessing what they feel they're going to need with regard to amendments to the document. And then once that's worked out, those will come to the board for approval. And then we will move into the process of the user group committee handling and being the funnel for everything else as we move forward. Is that clear? Make sense? So we've kind of got this legal issue and we've got these board issues kind of all commingled into one. And once we get past the first couple steps, it'll all become very smooth and elegant. And each month you'll be seeing applications from folks that have an interest in coming on the board that have been approved by the user group committee after their procedures are set up. So, any questions? Bob, did I cover that adequately to our purposes?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have for this agenda item, Mr. Chair.
Okay. If there's not any questions, we will move on to new business. Any new business at all? I don't see any. There's none listed anyway. All right, open up the floor for public comment. Anybody here at City Council Chambers have a public comment? If you do, please step up to the podium. All right, not seeing a whole lot of movement there. Any public comment for those that are on the phone? right. Hearing none, next thing on the agenda is adjournment. May I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Beckman, again.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kamachis. Again, thank you very much for your time served, Tom, and we'll miss you and hopefully see you around some. So,
Will do.
all right.